The season finale of Rick and Morty dropped last night, and it answered an endless stream of questions while managing to raise a few more, all while further developing the story of Evil Morty, and perhaps even bringing it to an end. I'm Deepcut, welcome back to Cartoon Universe, and let's talk about everything that went down in last night's two-part finale for Rick and Morty. Oh, and subscribe. The entire first half of this two-parter was on the absurd end of things, and focused on Rick deciding to train two crows to be his sidekick over Morty. This went well for Rick, and he ended up embracing the crows in an almost spiritual way, dedicating himself to them as a partner for some time and helping them to chase their own adventure. This was done to create a clearly fake breakup of sorts for Rick and Morty, wherein Morty clearly wants to get back together, but Rick is too invested in his crows, highlighting how, just like in previous episodes, Rick can lose sight of his relationships when chasing his obsessions. Rick returned to Morty, and Morty forgave Rick, but it led to them needing to get new portal fluid and getting to the high point of the finale, the return of Evil Morty when they try to purchase some at the Citadel of Rick's. Now, while the entire first episode and some of its lead into the second episode may feel like absurd filler, it did establish something extremely important, or rather highlighted something extremely important. The aforementioned trend that can be seen across the entire series of Rick abandoning or endangering Morty to chase his strange obsessions, and then Morty being forgiving enough to take Rick back when Rick eventually feels sorry. In this second episode, Evil Morty invites our Rick and Morty to a special dinner, where Rick is almost certain that this presidential Morty is evil. It is revealed that Evil Morty was using a brain scan to get the rest of Rick's memories, with him already having most of his memories from the time he scanned his brain in Season 1, Episode 9, by using that remote control Rick. These memories were apparently important to completely understanding how the Citadel can be reverse engineered to rip a hole through walls within the multiverse. Evil Morty then unleashes a series of horrors in the form of portal fluid that seems to be in some way enhanced by dead Rick and Mortys, for reasons that will be more thematically clear later. While trying to find a way to escape, Morty demands that Rick tell him the actual truth about what is going on. Now, Rick takes this opportunity to inject Morty's brain with Rick's memories, which should mean that everything we see here is more or less true, not edited like they have been previously, such as in the Season 3 premiere where Rick altered his memories of his dying wife in order to upload a virus into the machine trapping him in his brain. In this version of Rick's history, we see that another Rick really did blow up his wife and daughter, proving pretty conclusively that our Morty is not actually Rick's grandchild, though that should not surprise anyone at this point. As I theorized in a previous video on Rick's timeline, this episode went on to confirm that Rick did not immediately create a portal gun after they were blown up, but that was just an embellishment for the fake memory to upload to that Galactic Federation's brainalyzer. When Rick did get the portal gun to work, he traveled to the more distant parts of the multiverse, exploring for fun as opposed to finding another wife and daughter to love, though that could have happened in between there. From there, Rick would eventually decide to hunt down the original Rick, who he blames for the death of his wife and daughter, and decides to kill any Rick along the way just to be safe. We can see in a montage of carnage that he becomes increasingly burnt out, with the endless number of Ricks seeming to really trigger his nihilistic belief about the meaninglessness of it all. An interesting thing to note here is that these scenes are used to indicate just how dangerous this Rick is compared to the others. While he is the only one that seems to be turning on his own kind, even sending in one Rick after another with the sole purpose of killing him did not work, and he even went on to kill everyone watching the experience remotely just to drive the point home. While we always knew our Rick was kind of special, considering how he was able to constantly best the other Ricks even when all the odds are stacked against him, it really highlights that he is one above the rest, so much so that he becomes absolutely necessary to the tech that creates the Citadel. It had been indicated in earlier seasons that the Citadel was one way for Ricks to hide out from the Galactic Federation. While there seemed to be Rick bases in the multiverse before, as we see Rick blasting his way through them in this episode, at some point the Ricks seemed to realize that they would need a base that could hop through dimensions in order to avoid the Galactic Federation in each one of them. This would be the best solution that they could come up with before eventually harnessing the power of the Mortys to hide their brainwaves while traveling. Our Rick's help in developing and building the Citadel would mean that most of the Ricks would be gravitating towards one point in the multiverse that he wouldn't have to traverse, and it would mean that the other Ricks calling off any attacks on him in return as part of the peace treaty. It is doubtful that Rick ever killed the Rick that killed his wife, so a peace treaty was pretty much the only option that he had after killing thousands of them aimlessly. As sometime after this, our Rick would crash land at a Beth's house, likely one of the many Beths that were seemingly abandoned by their fathers for them to travel the universe and hang out at the new Citadel. We don't know when this Rick returned, but her tears indicate that it had been quite some time, almost as if she never thought she would see Rick again. This eventually led to Rick becoming close with Morty, and brings us back to the present where Rick and Morty have discovered a secret plan of Evil Morty's. Armed with Rick's knowledge about how to exploit the Citadel, he reveals that all he really wants is to get a universe without Rick. In his explanation, he says that the central finite curve has something of a barrier surrounding it created by the Ricks. The central finite curve in previous episodes simply referred to the part of the multiverse where Ricks tend to exist, but Evil Morty explains that it actually consists of all the universes where Rick is the smartest man in that universe. The barrier around the finite curve seems to be built around the ego of Rick's. We saw in earlier seasons that Rick likes to be the smartest man in the universe, and one of them even said that the most disappointing part of creating portal technology is to learn that you aren't even the first person to have built portal technology. Upon discovering universes or multiverses where someone was extremely more intelligent than the Ricks, they decided to put up a wall so that they would never have to be challenged, so that they could always feel like the smartest man in the room. As Evil Morty highlights, this is just part of the nature of Ricks, a giant cradle where they never have to really be challenged by anyone superior to them. Evil Morty's only goal at the end of it is to break a hole through that barrier and leave the finite curve. He explains that the multiverse within the finite curve had essentially become a place that existed simply for Ricks, the most intelligent of beings within it, to farm Mortys. Mortys seem to die more often than Ricks, and we've seen millions of times already that they get their Mortys replaced with ease, and even our Rick isn't above this as a backup option. We have seen some Mortys taken from dead Ricks and re-educated and assigned to new Ricks so that they can travel out of the Citadel without detection from the Galactic Federation, and clones seem to also be an option. I imagine the desire for organic Mortys who aren't factory produced is something that keeps the market from becoming all about clones. A popular theory until now was that Evil Morty was once the Morty of our Rick, but if that is the case, this episode did not confirm it in any way. While there are still gaps in their stories, Rick didn't really know who this Evil Morty was, and Evil Morty indicated that it didn't really matter, that he was just one of the many jaded Mortys on this side of the finite curve, suggesting that our Morty may eventually become like him, though if Morty's forgiveness to Rick at the end is any indication, that will not be the case here. Evil Morty just seems to be the first to achieve the goal of escaping the never-ending cycle of serving Ricks. As we have seen throughout the series and again in this episode, even death isn't really an escape from the Ricks, as a Rick or Morty's consciousness often just slides into a clone, whether in this dimension or another. All of this only works unfortunately because Rick and Morty's have a perfect balance of Rick being selfish and Morty's being forgiving. Mortys, at the end of the day, all just want approval, whether they're following their grandfather on an adventure or being thrown into a war zone as a last-minute replacement for the original Morty. They always forgive what they've been through, just as our Morty ultimately forgives Rick for only returning to him because the crows dumped him in the previous episode. As much as they know their relationship is toxic, it is simply who they are as people. Evil Morty uses the deaths of the many Ricks and Mortys to fuel the Citadel as a weapon that breaks through a hole in the finite curve, and manages to bounce to a universe where, presumably, someone smarter than Rick exists, with an interesting yellow portal instead of a green one. While he could probably hop back into the finite curve for future episodes, this seemed to be the writer's way of wrapping up a story that they seemingly never really wanted to begin with, but one that they committed to writing a beautiful ending to, even if they had to drag their feet and act like they're only doing it for the fans the entire time. Our Rick and Morty ultimately escape, and we can't say what is next for them, but they have several more seasons to figure it out, and while this may mean the end of larger lore-driven episodes, it has certainly been an amazing way to wrap them up if so. But what do you guys think? Let me know in a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.